Go ahead, Doug.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see all of you here today. Minnesota is very cold this morning, very, very cold, well below freezing. And so it's a good day to be inside. I hope that all of you will have a wonderful day and have had a wonderful day. Let me get my slides up for this presentation, and we will go from there. Let's see. Wish there was a shortcut where this would go a lot faster, but apparently there are no shortcuts in life. At least every time I try to take a shortcut, I wind up having to do things over. Okay, I've entitled this "The Impossible is Possible." Now, I'm not really much for slogans because slogans oftentimes don't give you the details that you want to know. So, first of all, what is it that we think is impossible? And then if it's possible, how is it possible? So hopefully we'll ask and answer the appropriate question here today. It's been said many times that the best leaders will never ask us to do something they are not willing to do themselves or that they haven't already done. I know my wife was saying the other day that when COVID was kind of at its prime at the store, one of the things that they had to do was clean the bathrooms quite often. And she said she did that herself a lot. She's an assistant manager, and she cleaned those bathrooms a lot rather than always telling the least senior person in the place to go do it. She figured that it was something that everyone had to do. So I really admired her for that. Anyway, anyone who's been in military service will tell you that this is particularly important for the commanding officer to be in the middle of danger with you. It just doesn't work well with the soldiers on the front line when their commanding officer is hiding somewhere, sitting behind a desk and expecting them to be in danger. Yeah, the old saying of "Don't do what I do, do what I say" doesn't set very well with a lot of us. So, anyway, Jesus seems to ask Peter the impossible in this little story. Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times." And he's not limited to that. It's just an expression, a way to say as many times as it takes. That's really what that is meaning. And frankly, I bet when Peter heard that, it was like, I don't think I'm going to ask him any more questions because I don't want the kind of answers that he gives. How many times have we done that where we don't like the answer that we're given, so we just don't ask anymore, even though deep down inside we know that the person gave us the right answer. We just didn't want to hear it. I've done that a lot. It's like, well, I'm not asking them anymore because I don't like the answer. So for Peter and for us to have to forgive that often seems to be impossible. In Matthew 18 now in verse 23, Jesus tells a little story. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. So back, a lot of money, awful lot of money. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. A little different than what it is in our day and age in most places, but back then you could be thrown into debtor's prison. Probably still are places like that around the world where if you can't pay your debts, you get thrown in prison. But the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." This man had every intent of doing that, even though it appeared to be impossible. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. So it wasn't just be patient. It's like, okay, debt's canceled. Forget it. You don't owe me anything. Just go live your life. Keep on working. Live your life. The debt's over. Well, but when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, a small amount by comparison. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. And his fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I'll pay you back. And what Jesus is illustrating here is that oftentimes when we are forgiven and we get a break, so to speak, we often don't pass that on to others in a similar fashion. I got mine and tough, you're not going to get yours. That's just kind of the way we are. We're happy that our debt was wiped out and happy that we got away with it. But we're certainly not going to let people underneath us get away with it. As it says in verse 30, but he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. And how on earth are you going to pay somebody when you're in prison? How are you going to earn money to pay the debt? It's just so counterproductive. Anyway, verse 31, when the other servants saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed and went and told their master everything that had happened. The word got out that how this man had treated, because they knew the story. So I've entitled this slide, Who Really Can Be Forgiven? The story continues. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I cancel all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you just have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? Isn't that the way you were supposed to react? I mean, I forgave you, canceled the debt. Don't you think you should have learned from that? In anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. And then Jesus said to them, this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother from your heart. Why did he have to add that? From your heart. No pretending, no posing, no lip service, but from your heart. And we're pretty good at fooling ourselves. We can think we believe something, or we can think that we have forgiven someone, but deep down inside, we haven't done it. So who really can be forgiven? Well, the whole point of the story, it does seem like a hopeless situation, because if we're honest with ourselves, we can only come to one conclusion. That conclusion is we truly cannot forgive everyone who has wronged us. And we probably have wronged others that are not willing or able to forgive us completely. If we just pause for a moment and just kind of think about our lives, how many people are there out there that you really truly have not forgiven? And I mean truly, completely forgiven, way down in the depths of your heart. Well, maybe you've got kind of an uneasy truce with them. Maybe you're sort of on speaking terms, but have you really forgiven them completely and 100%? And what about other people out there that have got something against you because of something you said or did, or whether you recognize it or not? But I'm sure we've all wronged other people, and there are people out there that just aren't really willing or able to forgive us completely. Maybe they misunderstood you, or maybe it really was something you did that wasn't good, and they're carrying that grudge, and maybe they've been carrying that grudge for a long, long time. And furthermore, what if that person has died? The person that you have wronged now is dead, and you can't forgive them. You can't go to them and ask for forgiveness. Or maybe the person who has wronged you has died, and so they're never going to come back, and you know, and they're not going to be knocking on your door tomorrow and saying, "Oh, I messed up. Will you forgive me?" So it seems like a hopeless situation. But that's the point Jesus is making. He is not trying to up the ante here and say, try harder, work harder, read a bunch of books on forgiveness, struggle and struggle and struggle every single day, be burdened with guilt and just know that you are unable to do this. He's not saying that, because under our own power, we can't completely forgive. God is not an idiot. you know, he's not blind to the way we human beings are. He knows we can't completely forgive. He understands that we can't forgive others, and we can't even forgive ourselves. I would bet that every single one of us that is on this Zoom call is struggling with forgiving ourselves. We run these tapes through our head like, oh man, that was so stupid. I was such an idiot 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 minutes ago. Why did I do something so stupid? We can't even forgive ourselves. I'm sure that goes through the minds of most, if not all of us. And we recognize, hey, We need a miracle, or perhaps thousands of miracles for this to happen. And you see, this is the point of the story. We are unable to forgive our brother, and every person on earth is our brother and sister. We are unable to forgive our brother from our heart, really, truly. And I don't mean just pretending or posing or faking it, putting a fake smile on our face and sticking out our hand for a fake handshake. No, all of us are struggling with that. And if you don't think you are, if you don't think you are, if you think you've forgiven everybody, I've got an assignment for you. Pay close attention to yourself this next week and see how many times you are confronted with the reality that you have not forgiven so and so, that there's something in your past or something going on right now that you're still struggling with. And I think that'll pretty well take care of the belief that, yeah, I have forgiven everybody. I don't think that's true. If you have, you are one out of how many billion of us are there on the earth? Is the impossible even possible? Jesus is not demanding we forgive 70 times 7 on our own. He knows we can't. He knows we can't. He told the story in Matthew 18 to get us to understand it's impossible to do on our own. And since we can't do this on our own, what shall we do? That's what our reaction should be to that story. It's like looking Jesus in the eye and saying, I can't do this. I've tried so hard, Lord. I've tried so hard to forgive everybody. I've tried so hard and I'm just failing at it. I can't do this. What am I going to do? I'm going to get clobbered. What am I going to do? Well, he wants us to ask that question. Let me just turn for a second to 1 John chapter 4. There's a very short 3-word statement. God is love. Okay, again, God is love. It's a nice bumper sticker slogan. We've all heard that before. But how does that help us in this situation that God is love? How does that help us in our struggle with the topic of forgiveness? How on earth does that help us? Well, let's look at 1 Corinthians 13, and you often hear this read during a wedding. Most weddings will have this included in it, or at least lots of them do. I know I've used it a lot over my career. I've used these verses in wedding ceremonies. So instead of looking at this as Paul pointing the finger at you and saying this is what you should be, let's just for this time look at that and saying this is what God is. This is how God is. This is what God does, and this is what God does not do. Love is patient. God is patient. Love is kind. God is kind. It, that is love, God does not envy. Love, God, it does not boast. God is not proud. God is not rude. God is not self-seeking. God is not easily angered. And I've highlighted this one in red. It, that is God, keeps no record of wrongs. I remember the first time that soaked into me, maybe 30, 40 years ago. God keeps no record of wrongs. That blew me away. Could that be true? Could that be true? Well, I keep record of wrongs. And I keep record of the wrongs that people have done to me. I keep records of the stupid wrongs I've done. I keep records of those. God doesn't do that. Well, how can there be a judgment? How can I appear before the high court of heaven, stand there and have this judge read a record of my wrongs when he says, I don't have a record of you. I don't have a record of your wrongs. Verse 6, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Love, that is God, always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. That is absolutely astonishing. That's almost impossible to believe. In fact, it is impossible to believe most of the time. You mean God's love for me never fails? I don't believe that. I've done some pretty bad things. I've been struggling with this or that for a lifetime, and I've never been able to get over it, never been able to conquer it. And you mean His love never fails. I don't believe that. That can't be so. That's kind of what we go through in our heads. But the truth is, he never fails. His love for us never fails. This is why. Because we cannot truly love and forgive completely from the depths of our hearts, Jesus came to dwell inside our very being to forgive and restore us from the inside out. And I didn't write this down, but John 14:20, it says, and on that day, you will know that I am in the Father, you are in me, and I am in you. And that's what he did by coming to this earth, becoming human, taking on flesh, being born of a woman, living a life, being crucified, being in the tomb, all the human experience. He experienced death, and then being brought back to life, resurrected, and ascended. And he did that to get inside of us. That's what's called being born again. He born us again. That's something he did because we were dead in our transgressions and sins. We cannot born ourselves again. Oh, we can come to the realization that he's done that and accept that, but we can't do that. We can't give ourselves new birth any more than we could give ourselves birth the first time. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit do for and in us what we could never do for ourselves. We cannot recreate ourselves. Impossible. But he does that inside of us, absolutely inside of us. It's an inside job. The miracle of transformation is done from the inside out. In John 4, or 1 John 4, verse 16, I'll continue the God is love statement. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in him. Now, this is a statement of fact, but let's also take it as, in a sense, a prediction of our future. Because God lives in us, and his love is going to grow in us, and it's going to come to completion, like in verse 17. In this way, love is made complete among us. And it may be hard to see in us sometimes. It may be kind of hard to see in the other guy, but it's happening. Why? So that we will have confidence on the day of judgment, because in this world we are like him. There is no fear in love. Now, there is respect in love. And that, in a way, that word fear is kind of well, it's sort of easy to understand, but also hard to understand. Love, if you really love someone, you may be, in a way, afraid you're going to do something to hurt them, I suppose. But there's a fear that's more like respect and honor. There is that, but there is no terror in love. I'll use the word terror for right now. But perfect love drives out fear, drives out terror. You see, drives out. It's a process, because none of us is totally free from fear, at least at this point in our lives, because fear has to do with punishment. Jesus took all the punishment on himself. He is not punishing us. And so often we think that if we're going through some kind of a trial, we think, oh, God is punishing me. No, he's disciplining us. It may feel like punishment, but he's not punishing us. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. So if you are listening to this and you say, yeah, but I'm still afraid. Where is God? Well, look, the reality of it is just settle down. If you're still afraid, which we all are, it's just an indicator that, hey, we're not quite made perfect yet. He's still working on that. It's like looking at the gas gauge, and the gas gauge is like maybe half full or three-quarter full, but it's filling up. It's filling up. So the one who fears is not made perfect in love. And I say, not yet, but it's happening. It's happening. So we can, and we can remember that. Let's learn to see others and ourselves through the eyes of Jesus. Because oftentimes we find ourselves disagreeing with Jesus about ourselves. He says, you are loved. You are my child. And we say, no, no, no. You don't know me very well. If you really knew me like I knew me, you wouldn't love me. and Jesus does see you. So let's look through his eyes. While being crucified, Jesus said, and this is found in Luke 23 and verse 34. This is to me, one of the most powerful statements that Jesus made in his entire earthly ministry. He looks out over this audience of people, ordinary folks, some wealthy, some poor, some really smart ones, some probably not so smart, some lepers. I mean, all different kinds. And there were two guys, both criminals. And I think they were insurrectionists or terrorists, if you want to call them that. One on one side and one on the other. There were the Roman soldiers who had beaten him and stuck a spear in him. There were religious leaders who had sold him out. There were his disciples who by then were scared to death and already running. There were some of the women standing around, totally helpless, couldn't do a thing, and they were crying and weeping. And he says, and at first when I first read this many years ago, I really limited that, and I argued with him about it. He says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. And I know when I first read that, I argued with God about it. I said, you know full well what they're doing. They're killing you, for crying out loud. Why do you say that? Why do you say they don't know what they're doing? And as I got older, I began to realize that was true. I have done so many things that later on, I look back and I say to myself, what on earth was I thinking? That was so stupid. And I'm sure all of us have said that. And I still probably will say that until the day I die. I have to admit, I do not know what I'm doing, fully know what I'm doing. I don't know. This is how Jesus sees it. He knows we, all people, don't know what we're doing. The question is, should I argue with Jesus and say those who hurt me do not know what they're doing? Because I'd like to argue with Jesus and say the people that have hurt me know full well what they're doing, right? And even those people that you think you have, or that you have, at least in your mind, intentionally harmed, did you really, really, really know what you were doing? Jesus says, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. So look at that situation through his eyes, because he says, you don't know what you're doing. And he says that those who have hurt you don't know what they're doing, didn't know what they were doing. And he's going to deal with it. And remember, as I wrap it up with this, remember, love, that is God, never fails. Our great Heavenly Father, I just want to say a great big thank you to you for all of this that you have caused to be inspired and written in the scriptures, that we may come to know you fully and better and fully. And I know it's a hard thing for me to grasp that you will never give up on me. It's a hard thing for me to grasp that those who have harmed me and those that I have harmed, that you look at the situation and say, yeah, Doug, forgive them. They didn't know what they were doing. Or to them, to me, Doug, they didn't know what they were doing. Let it go. Doug, you didn't know what you're doing. Let it go. Forgive yourself. I've got this. I've got it taken care of. You didn't know what you're doing. You couldn't do that. You can't live up to that standard. But I am in you, and I'm helping you to learn how to love. And I'm helping you to learn how to forgive. And besides, I've already done it for you. Now walk with me. Take the journey with me, because I'll bring you there. I will get you there. You don't have to be afraid. In your name, Jesus, I thank you. Amen.